What do you get when you combine bad first half offense with untimely second half defenses and special teams mistakes? You get the Washington Commanders' fifth loss of the 2024 NFL season. Let's do this.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Commanders fans, to this live episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, David Harrison, covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com, also helping out WUSA9.com this year with their local coverage of the team. I'm here with you every Monday through Friday, especially in post-game form, live from Northwest Stadium here in Landover, Maryland. I appreciate you coming through for today's episode. If you're one of the everydayers out there, I appreciate you coming through every day, especially when you do it during the hard times, like in the midst of a 3-game losing streak. Locked On Commanders is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders. We're doing that no matter what happens, no matter what holiday, no matter what the winning or the losing brings. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to today's episode. We're going to go over the anatomy of a collapse. We're also going to talk about the stagnation of the Washington Commanders offense and where they failed to meet our 3 must-dos of the week that ultimately resulted in this latest loss to the Dallas Cowboys. And, of course, we're going to talk about the Washington Commanders dropping their 3rd straight game, their first of 2 games against the Dallas Cowboys, and their 2nd straight NFC East Divisional game. So a big whammy here handed out in Week 12. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers, you place a $5 bet, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. So the final score here from Northwest Stadium in Landover, Maryland: Washington Commanders 26, Dallas Cowboys 34. The Washington Commanders fall to 7-5. The Dallas Cowboys advance to 4-7. Commanders still remain second place in the NFC East as of right. Well, just they will be second place in the NFC East. Of course, tonight, Sunday night, Philadelphia Eagles visiting the Los Angeles Rams. And now what turned into what was hopefully the Rams can beat the Eagles so that things can kind of get evened out a little bit more. Now it's you kind of need the Rams to beat the Eagles because this is where the Eagles have the opportunity to start expanding themselves and separating themselves from the pack in the NFC East Division. But before you can even worry about the standings in the NFC East Division, you got to worry about just winning a football game if you're the Washington Commanders. And that was kind of the message that we heard from several of the veteran players in the locker room following the game. And the way this went down, we didn't have any scoring initially in this game. A couple of possessions went by without any scoring. The Dallas Cowboys defense actually was able to drive down the field to open the game. Not a very confident opening for the Washington Commanders defense, but ultimately they come up with a block punt. Quan Martin gets his hand on the punt. Mike Davis gets the return, gets it into plus territory. So if you don't know what plus territory means, it means into opposing territory. So anything Cowboys 49 and forward would be plus territory. Washington Commanders get to start that drive in that plus territory. They end up with a 41-yard field goal from Austin Seibert to open up the scoring. Unfortunately, they also lose Brian Robinson Jr. to an ankle injury. Now, Brian Robinson was able to come back in the game, but ultimately, especially in the second half, ended up sitting out the rest of the game. Did not have to talk after the game, which is common protocol for injured players, and opted not to as well. Had the option to, but he chose not to. Brian Robinson, a pretty not soft-spoken, but pretty quiet guy if he's given the opportunity to be, and that's what he did. That was the score. 9:01 in the first quarter. Washington Commanders get a field goal, and from there was no scoring. There was a lot of action. There were some injuries, unfortunately. There were some turnovers. There was some sacks going on, but no points. No points going up on the board. And in the first half alone, the Washington Commanders start 3 drives in Dallas territory. Again, that first drive of the game, Dallas 40, produces that first field goal of the game. Then they start at the Dallas 47 for their 3rd drive of the game. They start at the Dallas 39 for their 5th drive of the game. Those 3 possessions that begin, again, in plus territory, net 1 field goal, 1 punt, 1 interception. That is not the way that you take advantage of playing in plus territory, and that is the biggest takeaway of this game right now for me, which is this offense has lost all of its teeth. And really, if you want to go back to it and you want to kind of use hindsight for the 2020 vision that it affords us to have, you really go back to Week 8 against the Chicago Bears, and that is following the Week 7 win over the Carolina Panthers, where Washington Commanders quarterback Jayden Daniels gets injured. He hurts his rib, leaves that game after that first possession, doesn't come back in, is able to play against the Chicago Bears. And that's really the first game. If you go back and remember, we see the offense kind of sputter a little bit. Candy Waller of Bowie TV and I were talking about this in the press box ahead of and during tonight's game as well. And, at the time, you have that game against the Chicago Bears. The team's able to win thanks to the Hail Mary. You go into week 9, you go into week 10, you go into week 11, and then obviously we get here to week 12. And essentially, everybody's trying to give the team the benefit of the doubt. And you're saying, well, there's the rib injury. He's still probably getting over, trying to be a warrior, trying to gut it through. And I know I had some insiders say, hey, look, if the rib is hurting him that bad, they need to put Marcus Mariota in there. And I'll tell you right now, I completely understand the concept of if your starter is not able to play enough, well enough or physically enough to really get you that winning effort, then you need to turn to the veteran backup who maybe has some more experience and kind of weather the storm a little bit. Totally get it. It's just not how teams, unfortunately or fortunately, tend to operate. Then you have the game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, for example, where I would kind of go in there and say, that's not necessarily a terrible Jayden Daniels game. I know he missed the Luke McCaffrey throw and all that stuff, certainly had some misses of his own. But really outside the drops, I think the drops, if those things get cleaned up, the Washington Commanders have a much better opportunity to win that game. And then, of course, the one defensive gaffe towards the end of that game. But really, when you have the benefit of hindsight, and we kind of look back at this, and again, Sam Fortier of the Washington Post, we've all been talking about it, but Sam, just straight up asked Cliff Kingsbury this last week, straight up, hey, there seems to be a history of your offenses kind of fading in the back half of seasons. Kind of what are your thoughts on that? And Cliff kind of gave the old, I'm not really sure what you're talking about, what you're referring to. I'd have to see it and all those things. And, it is what it is. Didn't really want to answer the question. But this is just another one of those examples and one of the things that's going to be talked about here. And the bottom line is, you hate to see Brian Robinson get injured. Obviously, you hate to see any player get injured. And just the latest update on running back Austin Eckler, who got injured towards the end of the game, was knocked what appeared to be unconscious after the final kickoff return of the game. What we're told by a team spokesperson is that he's by now he's at the hospital getting additional testing. We're told that is out of an abundance of caution, that he seems to be okay, but they would just want abundance of caution. Let's get everything checked out. Let's be as thorough as possible. And certainly we all hope that Austin Eckler is doing okay. It was a terrible scene to see him down there and really kind of, just took the score and the standings and everything out of it. And you talk about the humanity of the game, and, he understands the risks. He takes those risks. I got it. But you still hate to see that going on with any player, especially one that you cover closely on this end of the contest. And, you'd hate to see it with a Cowboy as well, but it's a little bit harder when it's someone that you talk to on a near daily basis. So we're hoping that Austin Eckler is doing well. But the issue, going back to kind of the strategic part of this, is when Brian Robinson Jr. is not in the game, or Brian Robinson Jr. is not present for a game, this Washington Commanders running game pretty much just disappears. And that's a problem. And it can't be, and we talked about this before, it can't be a single point of failure operation when you talk about this Washington Commanders offense, this run offense. It can't just be, well, B-Rob's not there, we just don't have an answer. That's not good enough in the National Football League. So if you're Cliff Kingsbury, you have to be working constantly and diligently of figuring out new ways to run the ball, new ways to block up the ball, new ways to go find other offenses that have running backs like Austin Eckler and Jeremy McNichols at their disposal. I don't know, maybe use a guy like Chris Rodriguez more when he's on your roster. Right now, he's not even on the active roster anymore. Maybe he'll come back to the practice squad. We'll have to see. First, he's got to clear waivers. But even when they had him on the active roster, weren't really using him. But we've seen this time and time again. We can go back to last year, and you see it when Chris Rodriguez gets opportunities, he does pretty well with them. Again, not the best back. He's not Derrick Henry reborn or anything like that. But if you need that power presence and you have a power back and you don't use them, I don't understand why you're not also then coming up for new ways and innovative ways to block up and run with a running back like Austin Eckler, Jeremy McNichols, who wasn't necessarily a power back. So that will kind of continue to confuse me until we see Cliff Kingsbury figure it out and get it fixed. Something that Mike Zimmer, the defensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys, talked about leading into this game was about how the Washington Commanders offense likes to use a lot of misdirection. They like to get you going one way and come back the other way. And we've talked about this going back to training camp. You guys will remember me telling you about Jayden Daniels rolling out on a boot and throwing the ball back, halfway across the field and hitting a guy who's now wide open because the second level defender is following the boot action. And that's great. But the rest of the NFL has caught on to it. The rest of the NFL is no longer doing that. Now they're playing a much more disciplined brand of football when it comes to trying to defend Jayden Daniels as the scrambling, stay alive quarterback. So you've got to come up with different things. You've got to come up with new ways to attack people. And this offense is just, I look at it as a palette with no paint, right? If you know what I'm talking about, you see the painter with the canvas and the picture's halfway. The first half of the picture is painted and it looks beautiful, but you ran out of paint. You got to find a way to resupply the palette. That's kind of the best way I can do this. There's not enough Ben Sinnott. There's not enough Luke McCaffrey. There's not enough Jeremy McNichols when Brian Robinson isn't available. The only good thing we can really say about the totality of the offense, I know at the end of the game, we're going to talk about that too. Things got a little bit more exciting. But the only thing I can really say that's positive about the totality of the offense is that Jayden Daniels does indeed look healthy once again for the first time since week 7. That is certainly a positive, and that is maybe a little bit of paint on the palette that Cliff can use to start painting a new picture and make the second half, or the second quarter really, of this 2024 season look a little bit more like the first half of the 2024 season did. Because if not, there's going to be a lot more conversation about the job that Cliff Kingsbury is doing, and then it's going to start to bleed into the job that Dan Quinn is doing in holding his offensive coordinator accountable for producing that offense. But there were 3 things that the Washington Commanders had to do to win this game. They didn't do all of them, clearly, because they lost the game. We're going to dive into what they did do, what they didn't do, coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're going to do that today. Our show is sponsored in part by Hillsdale College. Time is your most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. Think about how you can spend that time wisely to improve yourself. Maybe you need to study a little bit. Maybe you want to look into some history, some economics, great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution, things that you did study in school but need a refresher on, or maybe things you didn't study in school that you've always been curious about, even had a cursory curiosity about and just a surface interest in. Maybe it's time you get a refresher on things that you used to love when you were in school. Time and technology have changed a lot of things, but they haven't changed the fundamental truths of the world. And our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, the history of classical music, Pythagoras, through Beethoven. So go to hillsdale.edu/locked-on to enroll today. There's no cost. It's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/locked-on to register, hillsdale.edu/locked-on. Today's episode is also brought to you in part by Prize Picks. And with Prize Picks, you can now win up to 100 times your money with as few as 4 correct picks. Now, with Prize Picks, you pick 2 players to 6 players, anywhere from there. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Doesn't matter. You look at their stat lines and you pick whether or not you think they're going to go more than that stat line or they're going to get less than that stat line. So if Jayden Daniels projected to throw for 205.5 yards, if you think he's going to throw for more than that against the Tennessee Titans next week, you pick the more. If you think it's going to throw for less, you pick the less, so on and so forth until you get 2 to 6 players. And like I said, with up to 4 players, you can win up to 100 times your money. It's the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Sign up today. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even have to win. The $50 is guaranteed. So cook up your hot takes and win real money this season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get that $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, don't even have to win to get the bonus with Prize Picks. Run your game. Continuing now with today's live episode of Locked On Commanders, following the Washington Commanders' 5th loss of the season, this one at the hands of the Dallas Cowboys. And, that one stings just a little bit more than the other ones do. After this show, I'm going to be firing up the Zoom, and we're going to have an insider exclusive Zoom where it's insiders and I get together, and it's not a show format. It's not me just lecturing you. It's us talking together. Commanders fans talking with me, what I see, what you think. You ask me questions. I ask you questions sometimes. We just have general good ball conversation. If you want to get in on that or everything else that comes with being an insider, go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Sign up now. Try it for free for the first 2 weeks, and that invite to that Zoom will be going out very shortly after we wrap this episode. But we got to get through the rest of this episode before we get to that, and we're going to start that here by talking about the 3 things that we identified last week that the Washington Commanders had to do to get the win. Every week we have crossover Thursday. This last week it was with Marcus Mosher of Locked On Cowboys, and we talk about the 3 things that each side of this matchup has to do in order to get a win. For me, number one was move Terry McLaurin. Number 2 was sack the crap out of Cooper Rush and don't give up any free chicken. Number 3 was earn and win the time of possession battle and ride the ground game. So judging from the initial assessment of this game, the Washington Commanders accomplished 0 of the 3. And I'm going to start with Terry McLaurin, and we're going to start with the end of the game, because Terry McLaurin finishes this game with the stat line of 5 catches, 102 yards, and 1 touchdown. And that's awesome. Here's the rub. Out of his 102 yards, his long was 86 yards. It was the 86-yard touchdown that the touchdown and the 2-point conversion brought the score to 27-26. Dallas Cowboys leading by 1 point. Or no, the kick, sorry, this was not the 2-point conversion. I'm ahead of myself. Terry McLaurin 86-yard pass made it 27-26. The extra point by Austin Seibert, which he missed, would have tied the game. But, of course, Austin Seibert missed the kick, and there are some other things that happened after that we'll talk about. But that 86-yard pass was the longest pass reception of the night, which means, if you do the math, you're talking about 16 yards that Terry McLaurin had in the other 4 catches. I think that math is correct. It might be, yeah, I think it's 16 yards. 16 yards is the amount of yardage that Terry McLaurin had on his other 4 receptions. That is not good enough. We're your number one target. And again, I know the conversation of is Terry McLaurin a true number one receiver in the NFL is coming up. Maybe we'll have that conversation in a later episode. For today, the bottom line is Terry McLaurin is the Washington Commanders' number one receiver. And for any NFL team, your number one receiver has to be more involved in that. 4 catches for 16 yards is a 4-yard per catch average. CeeDee Lamb, on the other side of this thing, didn't have a great night either. 10 catches, 67 yards at 6.7 yards per catch. And he had a 13-yard long, which, so you take that down to 54. Now you've got 9 catches for 54 yards. I don't know what that math is. It's over 5 yards. I think it's close to 6. If not, actually, I think it's 6 yards exactly per catch after that. So, you see the significant difference between the 2 receivers, 2 catches, 2 yards per catch more on one side than the other side. And you're talking about a side where, let's be honest, the Dallas Cowboys offense is not one of the top 4 in scoring in the league like the Washington Commanders has been so far this season. So, again, very disappointing night. The big play, the 86-yarder, which side of the field did Terry McLaurin line up on for that play? And where did he get the ball? The right side of the field. And look, I'm not going to sit here and say, just like we talked about last week, it's not you can't line up Terry split wide left 76% of the time and be successful. You certainly can. What you can't do is split Terry McLaurin wide left 76% of the time and run the same looks over and over and over again. You have to understand when your defense has figured you out, when the defense is prepared for what it is you're trying to do. And then when you look at it and say, man, the biggest play of the night for our offense, our number one receiver was not lined up where he is 76% of the time. He's lined up somewhere. He's lined up only 24% of the time. Part of that, which was split wide right. And again, I'm not sitting here saying every time you split Terry McLaurin, split wide right, you're going to get a touchdown, because that's not realistic either. But what the hypothesis that is starting to get proven here is you need to diversify this thing. You can't come in every single week with the same offense you came in with the first 7 weeks and expect to have the exact same results. Again, the definition of insanity goes both ways. When you're successful doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, i.e. getting better, is not going to happen. That's insanity. When you're struggling, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting to get better from struggling, also not going to happen. So what we see in this offense is a little bit of insanity, and we need one of these coaches, whether it be Cliff himself or Dan Quinn, holding his offensive coordinator accountable, needs to come through and figure out a different way. Again, if you're not going to move Terry McLaurin, fine. You don't have to move Terry McLaurin, but you have to move what's happening around him. You have to change the picture. You hear defensive coordinators and secondary coaches talking all the time about one of the most critical parts about playing successful defensive back play in the secondary is having good eyes, knowing where to look, knowing where to see, learning how to read it, and learning how to act off of what you read and trust what you see. The Washington Commanders right now do not look like they're challenging the eyes of the Dallas Cowboys defense, Philadelphia Eagles defense, Pittsburgh Steelers defense, and it doesn't look like they're going to challenge the eyes of the Tennessee Titans defense, which means you might have a similar offensive result when you play the Tennessee Titans here next week. There's got to be new wrinkles. I asked Dan Quinn about when your tendencies get snuffed out, does it take more than one to do it? And he said, yeah, to a certain extent. But then he also kind of said at the end, but I think you're going to see some changes this week. Zach Ertz said they tried some new things. They did. But here's kind of what it looked like to me. If salsa and chicken is one of my favorite meals, follow me on this. Salsa and chicken is one of my favorite meals, right? So if I tell my mom, hey, I know I love salsa and chicken, but we've had salsa and chicken for 8 straight weeks, for 9 straight weeks, for 12 straight weeks. Can we change it up a little bit? And then tomorrow she brings me salsa and chicken, but now it's mango salsa. Yeah, it's different, but also it's not. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of feel like watching this Washington Commanders offense, like I looked for it all night long. I said, I want to see where the changes are. I want to see where the differences came in. And it just looked like a different kind of salsa, but it's still salsa. I really hope you follow that analogy with me because I kind of came up with it here on the fly. We got two more things we got to talk about before we get out of here. So we're going to do that on the other side of this moment right now on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's live episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you in part by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers to FanDuel, you bet $5, you'll get $150 in bonus bets if that bet wins. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place your live bets in the NFL all in one place. Or you can make your bets before the games like right now. The Washington Commanders, at least the last time I was able to check, the Washington Commanders 7.5-point favorites next weekend hosting the Tennessee Titans. That line might change a little bit. I have a hunch that's going to change a little bit. Or in the middle of the game, if you get a hunch, if you're like, man, this is a 3-3 game, a lot of mistakes. But you know what? I just feel like Jayden Daniels is going to rush for an anytime touchdown. I just feel like Terry McLaurin is going to catch an anytime touchdown. So let me go ahead and make those wagers on in-game lines. And you can go there, check out the latest stats, view the play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you can place that bet. Go to FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. All right, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders. Went a little bit long on must-do number 1, so let's hit number 2. Sack the crap out of Cooper Rush and don't give up any free chicken. The Washington Commanders come up with exactly 1 sack. Look, there was no Tyler Smith. There was no Zach Martin. Tyler Guyton was out there playing with a bum shoulder. There was undrafted guys on this offensive line. This pass rush, look, the defense overall did a very good job, especially against the run. But this pass rush did not get home enough on Cooper Rush. They did get pressures, so we do have to give them a little bit of credit there. But the only sack of the game goes to Daron Payne. And ultimately, Cooper Rush throws for 247 yards, 2 touchdowns, a 117.6 passer rating. And the Dallas Cowboys come away with a total net passing yard total of 241. The Washington Commanders defense had not allowed a net passing total over 206 yards in over a month. So this is the highest net passing performance that we have seen against this defense in over a month. And it comes from an offense using a backup quarterback on a team that most people said had given up on this season. So that part of this, not very good. You don't want to see that. You want to definitely see that. But you also kind of can't sit here and blame the defense because the Washington Commanders controlled the ball for 24 minutes and 48 seconds. 5 minutes and 12 seconds less than 2 full quarters of this game. The Washington Commanders were on the field. The Dallas Cowboys offense was on the field for 35 minutes and 12 seconds. That is a near 11-minute difference in time of possession. That was number 3. The Washington Commanders are now 1-5 in games where they failed to win the time of possession battle. That one win, Chicago Bears, which you could say outside of a miracle, pretty much lost that game. Due to a miracle, you almost won this one, which is cool, which shows you that, yeah, you do have a special quarterback in Jayden Daniels. Nobody should be doubting that, but Jayden Daniels is not ready, nor should any rookie have to be ready to carry the stinking team. And the offensive designs, the offensive players, they've got to do some things. We saw some drops today in the game. Noah Brown had a couple of drops. I think Zach Ertz had a drop. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Austin Eckler had a drop. You can't have these drops when you have a rookie quarterback. You have to find a way to pick him up and to help him out. Looking at some key plays to this game, I think the key play, when you look at the totality of the game and ultimately how things transpired, again, the Washington Commanders are down 1 score. They make the game 27-20 on Austin Seibert, 51-yard field goal. And then they come through. Terry McLaurin gets the touchdown, and things are tight, right? Zach Ertz 4-yard touchdown catch from Jayden Daniels. That's what I was trying to find. Makes it 20-17 after the 2-point conversion. You've got over 3 minutes left. You have the 2-minute warning. The Washington Commanders had 2 timeouts. The defense, that's the opportunity. It's like, look, we know you're tired. We know you've been on the field too long, but come out here, make a stand for us. And Kevontae Turpin takes a kickoff 99 yards after he fumbled it. Botched it, whatever you want to call it. Takes it 99 yards. Kevontae Turpin, look, we talked about him. I wrote about him. All right. It's no surprise. Dan Quinn's not surprised by it. Joe Witt's not surprised by it. Larry Izzo's not surprised by it. All right. It is what it is. I can tell you right now that special teams ace Jeremy Reeves really putting this loss on his own shoulders. And I don't think that's fair to himself. He and I had a little side conversation. I've never been a football player, but I was in the Army, which is in some ways the ultimate competitive arena, right? It's not wins and losses. It's living and dying. So, I feel like I have at least something to offer from a competitor standpoint, if not an NFL standpoint. I don't have anything to offer, a guy like Jeremy Reeves from an NFL standpoint. But as a competitor, I share some words with him. I don't know how he took them, to be honest. Like, he received them very well. But, just trying to help him out because you love the fact that he cares enough to put this whole darn thing on his own shoulders. But you feel for the guy because it certainly is not all on Jeremy Reeves or any other one person, even on Austin Seibert. Yes, I know his missed extra point is like the glaring play at the end of the game and all that stuff, but it's still not on just Austin Seibert. There's a good enough amount of blame to go around for this entire team. Look, I know we do 3 stars. We're not doing 3 stars for this game, guys. 3-game losing streak. We're not going to do the 3 stars again until this Washington Commanders team gets a win. Certainly, there's some guys who deserve some praise, and maybe we'll do that moving on in the week. We got film study coming up and everything like that. We can break down some positives from the game. We'll do that. But tonight, we're not going to do that. The Washington Commanders are 7-5. I'm going to hit the road. You are probably going to watch the Philadelphia Eagles, hoping the Los Angeles Rams can do some damage and keep the Washington Commanders relevant in this NFC East race. There's still plenty of football to play. Zach Ertz and Bobby Wagner, 2 of the vets on this team, made sure to specify that to their younger teammates, to the media, to the fans, to themselves. There's still plenty of football. 5 games still left in this schedule. This team can still finish with 12 wins on this season, and every single one of these games is a game that this team can win. The question is, are they going to win it? We're going to start talking about this next win after this, or during this week, after we wrap up talking about this loss to the Dallas Cowboys. So I thank you for riding with me here on this group therapy session of Locked On Commanders live from Northwest Stadium in Landover, Maryland. I look forward to talking to you again later on this week. For your next listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast. It's all new, and it's twice per day. It's a lot of fun. Thanks for coming through here every dayers. Thank you for coming through every single day. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I will see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.